Good afternoon for those of you who are with us on the East Coast. Good morning for those on the West. If I haven't met you face to face, let me start with just a little bit about who's talking to you and what I'll be talking about. My name is Chris Johnson from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I've had the challenge and privilege of being the lead technician on some of the coolest transportation projects in southeastern Wisconsin for the last couple of years. The Marquette Interchange, the North-South Freeway, and now the Zoo Interchange. I've got a BS in mechanical engineering, and I've been doing CAD work since I was a sophomore in high school. So to me, it feels like this stuff is in my blood. The things that I've been enjoying most right now in my career are visualizations, making pretty pictures, and also making code to leverage the computer to turn the crank on tasks that can be automated. I'm doing that in Visual Basic and Visual Basic for applications. The presentation that you'll be hearing this morning is going to be split up into 4 parts. Number 1, about 10 minutes I'll spend on what a 3D PDF is. Spend about 15 minutes on showing how to make one. I'm going to touch just for 5 minutes on some possibilities of ways that you can add some bells and whistles to this content, and then we'll end with 5 to 10 minutes of Q&A depending upon the level of interest. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to hit on when explaining what a 3D PDF is, what do I mean by BIM when I am using it in the title BIM for Everyone? Well, I'm going to have to admit right off the bat that I'm using that phrase mostly as a catchy sounding title. A 3D PDF is not exactly BIM. So the question is, what is BIM and why can I use that term? Well, according to our design automation community of practice, BIM stands for Building Information Modeling. Now, I've been on the VDC subcommittee under the TRB Visualization in Transportation Committee for the past 2 years, which is more than enough time to realize that the terminology and definitions around this concept differ across practitioners, and it's changing over time, and it's changing pretty rapidly. As a matter of fact, the VDC subcommittee just changed its name to VDC/SIM, Civil Integrated Management, to incorporate these changing terminology for this technology. Now, there's a lot that Jane Alden and other technologists can offer you in the way of defining what products and processes can be covered under the umbrella of BIM. But for the purposes of this presentation this afternoon, I'm going to focus on a common thread between all of the definitions here of BIM, SIM, and VDC. And that is a common denominator of using 3D digital models. Okay, so what does a PDF have to do with BIM for Everyone? So outside of it being a flashy title, its strength, while admittedly it's shallow in terms of the content that can be shared in a 3D PDF, it's especially broad because of one simple fact, and that is a PDF is accessible. Now, nearly every PC, Mac, and tablet user on the planet has familiarity with PDFs. PDF stands for Portable Document Format, so it's built for portability. And it's freely accessible to everyone with internet access. So it's because of this simple fact, given its ability to contain a 3D model data, that PDFs can be used to take what was previously in just the design camp out into the camp of construction, document controls, the entire project team. So now I'm going to turn the page and show an example of a 3D PDF. So what you're looking at here as an example of a 3D PDF is a document, a model that was provided to the construction team on the Zoo Interchange project that's currently still in design, and it's also undergoing in construction. This PDF was created and delivered to the construction team because, as I'll touch on a little bit later, WISDOT, Southeastern Freeways, recently put into practice the delivery milestones of the design model to the construction team earlier than previous. So I'm going to just hit a few bullet points of what some of the facets of this data is. So this truly is a 3D document, and we've got saved views here that were generated from the authoring platform, which in this case is a MicroStation file. So I've named these here ground level west. We're at ground level. Here's one that I think is particularly interesting. There is a pedestrian bridge, a pretty fancy pedestrian bridge in this contract. And like I said, this isn't just a slideshow or a canned presentation. This document can be navigated by the user live in the same way that its native CAD platform can. So I can rotate it, I can pan the project, I can zoom in. There's also some functionality to walk around the model or fly around the model. Now, the content can be displayed in a number of different ways. So right now we're currently seeing it in a transparent mode where you can see some of the underground storm sewer design below the roadway. Some of the other ways that we can display this is solids. And even you can opt to display this as wireframe. All right, I'm going to show off one of the, to me, one of the most interesting and powerful functionalities of this platform is that it contains the same data structure from the authoring platform. So for instance, in what Adobe calls a model tree, you can see on the left-hand side here that the structure is maintained, the file structure. So proposed roadway was the model name within the authoring software. Proposed storm sewer, proposed structures, temporary lighting. Those are all generated from the authoring software. I can also drill down, and you can see here that there's a number of reference files within that model, and the file names of those references were maintained as well. So if I happen to know that WEB is my eastbound roadway on Watertown Plank, I can opt to turn that off and perhaps even drill down further and just turn on the concrete pavement layer of that design file. So one of the functionalities that surfaced from one of the first meetings with the construction team as I provided this data and showed them what all is involved in it, I got the question of, Chris, if I'm interested in finding out not only that there's a structure that's potentially, very close to a pile or a footing, but I want to know what structure ID. Is there any way for me to discern or query what the structure is? So I went back to the drawing board and figured out a way to deliver that content to them by assigning elements according to their structure ID. So for instance, if you can see when I select a pipe and it changes from that translucent blue to a purplish color here, and we've got the bounding box around it. If you notice under the model tree, it navigates right away to that piece of geometry. And you can see that the level name pipe 1121 is associated with that. Similarly, if I select on this inlet here, you can see by virtue of the geometry, I'm able to now discern that this is inlet 1122, and likewise for all of the other solids in this storm sewer. Okay, so the last functionality that I want to highlight to you is that this PDF also contains a drive-through animation that was generated in the authoring software. And so as you see the screen refresh and things are flying by, you can opt to turn off elements that you don't desire to see on the fly. And so now we're just looking at the storm sewer and the proposed structures. And anywhere along this animation, we can stop it. We can navigate around. I'm going to spin this around a little bit. And we can take a look and find out which of these structures is close to the piles. And I can tell you by selecting on these elements that inlet 711 here is close to structure B40 778. So you can see the pile level is being selected for bridge B40 778. Okay, one piece to note before I completely turn my attention into what prompted this and how to generate is the level of effort. Assuming that the 3D content has been generated, what you're looking at here is the reflection of probably on the magnitude of 2 or 3 hours worth of work to organize the data into kind of what I would call user-friendly, self-explanatory structure, just proposed roadway being called proposed roadway, and likewise the storm sewer, as well as put in the canned animation. Right, so let me just touch a few words on what prompted this. Why even 3D PDF and being given to the construction team? Well, as I tipped my hat to earlier, WSDOT in April of this year put out this enhanced plan development process. And this specified various milestones throughout the design phase to provide the design model to the construction team. If you could see there in blue dots, those are 3 different times along the design phase that we are to provide to the construction team a design model. But because the construction team didn't have the same access or familiarity with the software application that the design team was using, a 3D PDF was used to deliver this content to the team in order for them to navigate it in a way that's accessible and familiar. And now this is something that the 3D modeling and civil integrated management and building information management modeling and VDC, virtual design and construction, this is stuff that is gaining statewide momentum in WSDOT, and WSDOT is looked to as one of the top 5 departments in the nation that are spearheading this technology. So let me turn the attention then to an example of how to generate a 3D PDF. I'm pulling up MicroStation, and there are 3 main steps to authoring this 3D PDF. You can do this from AutoCAD, in Autodesk software, and you can also do this from MicroStation. Those are the 2 big dogs on the street as far as CAD platforms go. And let me just refer you to a tech tip that was recently put out for automating a PDF file through ProjectWise. That tech tip outlines a workflow that you'd be able to generate one of these 3D PDFs that I'm showing you. So the 3 steps that I'm going to highlight in this MicroStation workflow. Number 1, you've got to generate your 3D CAD models. So I'm already starting with that being generated. Number 2, it needs to be organized in a file level structure. Now, just by virtue of you generating the models, you're already going to have a file and level structure in place, but it may not be the structure that you want to deliver in this content, in this 3D PDF. So that's another extra step that you need to do if you want to change the way that it's organized. And then finally, optionally, if you'd like to have one of those canned animations, a drive-through in it, you've got to define that camera path. So here's my MicroStation file, and if I bring up the reference dialog box, you can see I've organized this just by virtue of what reference files are attached. I've got existing buildings. You can see Milwaukee's beloved Miller Park Stadium turns on and off. We've got proposed roadway that is attached here. I've also got existing structures and proposed signing. So just to make this quick and increase performance, I've got just a handful of proposed elements displayed for you. Now that the content is there and it's got the file and level structure, the next thing that you'd have to do is to define the camera path. And I'm just going to breeze over this to give you just a highlight of how this would take place. But when I go to another view here in wireframe, what I've got selected there is a 3D alignment that I displayed from the design platform, which in this case is Inroads. That 3D alignment was displayed from, you could see this east-west mainline alignment, and I've put it about 16 feet vertically off finish grade, and approximately in the center of the lanes. I've taken that 3D line string and then I made a B-spline out of it just to smooth it out. So now that I've got a path for my camera, I then define the camera here, and under the visualization tools there is a setup camera tool to use in order to specify the view, the location of the camera, and the camera target. Now once that view is specified and the camera is set up, in your animation tools you can then create an animation camera from that view. And so you can see here highlighted is a camera cell, and I've already done that. The next step that you would do would be to define the path of the actor, and the actor in this case is the camera. The camera is going to be the actor that's going to move along the path. So I have defined that alignment as the path for that camera, and you can see here in the animation producer I've scripted both the path and the camera itself. So that's a very fast breeze by example of how to generate an animation. And you can see here when I bring up my animator preview, as I slide through the animation timeline, the camera is in fact moving along that path. So I've got my 3 components. I've got the model, it's organized, and I've got my camera path. all that's left for me to do is to go to the print command, MicroStation's native print command, and in order to have the option to print this to 3D, you have to have the a print driver that supports this. So out of the box, MicroStation provides you with this pdf.pltcfg. That's a plot configuration file. So all you would do is go ensure that Bentley driver is selected and select the print driver configuration. And for most of you in the workspaces, it's going to just be in the vanilla out-of-the-box MicroStation. You're going to look for the pdf.plt configuration file. Now that configuration file enables this button here, which allows you to print the content to a 3D file as opposed to just a 2D file. Under Settings, there are 3D plotting options. And this is the dialog box where you can opt whether or not you want to include the animation in the 3D PDF, specifying your frames per second. And just for any of you who are going to go back and try this out, just a little tip that for the sake of the refresh rate and the speed of your machine, if you go up to the standard 30 frames per second, it's going to be very slow. But if you take that down, it's going to increase the speed and it'll have a little bit better feel. So I've got this set at 15 frames per second. You can also specify things like how you want to display it. I've got shaded solid selected and the lighting. So from here I would just click print and it would start baking. Now it takes about a minute for it to process through with the file that you're looking at here. So like Julia Childs in The Magic of TV, I'm going to pull out a pre-baked PDF that I made from that file that you're looking at there. And in The Magic of Live Meeting, you can see here that this is that PDF, the 3D PDF. It's got the built-in animation that was defined. It's got the model tree that specified with the file names that were displayed. If I were to select on some roadway geometry, I can determine which level that is and which file that is associated with. And I can opt to turn them on and off as desired. Now I'll just spend a few minutes briefly on sharing with you some of the possibilities that you have to add some bells and whistles. I just want to tip my hat first to keeping an eye on the technology and the trends. Since I started generating these 3D PDFs, there have been additional plugins and companies that have started out there in order to help facilitate the authoring of this content. So because we're on the bleeding edge of how transportation is utilizing this 3D technology, it's changing often. I'm going to show you a few examples of how you can leverage automation to increase the functionality of a PDF, as well as how you can utilize JavaScripts and controls or custom programs and buttons in a PDF. You can even annotate on a fly. So if you were to hand this over to the construction team, they can measure the clearance between a sign structure and the finished grade. As far as leveraging automation goes, one of the two examples I'll show you is in the software that modeled the roadway. There's about a dozen different roadway modelers for the Zoo Interchange, and when they started modeling this, while there was specific styles associated with their roadway templates. So for instance here, concrete pavement style was associated with those components. The preference file wasn't set up in order to have that displayed in the same way by level. So automation, a custom automation application was developed in order to take that metadata on the mesh elements of style and assign microstation levels accordingly. So you can see here that now we've got a concrete pavement level associated with that style. The second example of leveraging automation is to generate the content. Now, one of the requirements for this project was to develop an approximation of the 3D utility file. What we had to start with was a 2D utility file, which was a compilation of as-built and survey. And we also had a three-dimensional existing terrain model. Now, in coordination with the utility manager for the project, he had a whole table of assumptions that he used in order to communicate approximate depths per utility type. So a custom application was developed to take the recipe of the 2D data and by level and by cell essentially remap the 2D data and drape it onto a 3D file. And so here is an example of a small portion where 2D elements, here lighting, was draped, converted to mesh elements, and cells were replaced, 2D cells were replaced with 3D cells. Likewise, the signing was done, or the signals were done, fiber optic, and all the rest of the utilities likewise. So that's another example of how automation could be leveraged in order to generate the content. I'll also show an example of JavaScript. So in this example here, there's JavaScript that is working with a control that enables me to navigate through hundreds of lane miles worth of alignments. This is the Zoo Interchange project in southeastern Wisconsin. This is a very preliminary phase of the design. This is at 30%. And this custom control was developed in order to help navigate from one alignment to the next throughout this very long built-in animation sequence. And then finally, as I said, there are analysis tools built in to the PDF to Adobe in order to measure elements in 3 dimensions in the PDF. And that's something that you can opt to save it, and it will store that annotation into the file itself. And with that, I will open it up for any questions that you have.